The wind on Oakridge Street carried the scent of old paper and cinnamon, the kind of soft, forgettable morning only bookstores could host. Sienna Clark pulled her hoodie a little closer as she stepped through the rusted iron gate of Winslow's used books. Her fingers clutched a small cloth tote with a library card poking out, and her eyes, calm and thoughtful, scanned the shelves inside for something rare, something honest. She didn't know that this morning would change everything. Outside, Officer Ray Delmore leaned on the side of his cruiser, sipping coffee from a dented thermos. He wasn't new to this street, and he certainly wasn't new to the quiet assumption that certain faces didn't belong in certain corners of town. When he saw Sienna step out of the store, her bag slung across one shoulder, her posture relaxed, something behind his eyes narrowed. He didn't see a student. He saw a challenge. She was halfway down the block when she heard his boots. "Hey, you, stop right there." Sienna turned slowly. Her expression didn't register fear, just quiet confusion. "Is something wrong, officer?" He didn't answer. Instead, he motioned toward her bag. "You buy anything in there?" Yes, sir," she said, adjusting the strap. "A book. I have the receipt." "Let me see your ID." She blinked. "May I ask why?" That was enough for him. In two strides, he closed the distance. One hand reached toward her tote, the other hovering near his belt as if reminding her of where authority lived. "Don't get smart with me. Show me your bag and your ID." Sienna instinctively took a small step back. "I'm sorry, I just don't understand what I've done wrong." And then, in a flash that didn't belong to any procedure, any handbook, or any notion of decency, his hand struck her face. It wasn't the kind of slap meant to subdue, it was the kind meant to humiliate. Sienna fell back, the book tumbling from her hand, skidding across the sidewalk like a discarded truth. Her cheek flared red instantly. The silence that followed wasn't the peace of order, it was the stunned breathlessness of witnesses too shocked to intervene. A woman gasped from a nearby flower stand. A teenager with earbuds yanked one out, frozen mid-step. And across the street, a 13-year-old boy named Darren instinctively raised his phone, recording without even realizing he had done so. Officer Delmore stood over her. "That's what happens when you don't listen," he muttered, then added more loudly, "Resisting a lawful order. Stay down until backup gets here." But Sienna wasn't resisting. She was trembling, not from pain, from restraint, from the deep, instinctual fire pressing against the cage of her ribs, not to fight back, but not to let him see her cry. She reached slowly for her phone, still clipped inside her coat. Her fingers trembled. She unlocked the screen, tapped one number, one name, Dad. The call rang once, then picked up. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. On the other end, Victor Clark's voice was calm. "Sienna?" A pause. She whispered, "I'm okay. But something happened. A police officer just hit me." The line went silent for a moment, not with hesitation, but with calculation. Victor didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask questions. He simply said, "Where are you?" That moment was not the start of a fight. It was the beginning of a reckoning. And Officer Delmore, who believed power came from volume and weapons, had just struck the daughter of a man who trained people how to end wars and rebuild peace. But Victor Clark wasn't coming with rage. He was coming with a purpose. And the city was about to learn that still waters don't mean shallow depths. Sometimes it means the storm hasn't started yet. The road from Fort Crest to Oakridge was just under 20 miles. But for Victor Clark, it might as well have been the length of the war he never spoke of. He didn't drive fast. He didn't need to. His hands rested steadily at 10 and 2 on the wheel, a rhythm formed from years of convoy driving under threat. His eyes scanned not just the road, but the spaces between, the trees, the shadows, the forgotten turns. He had already replayed Sienna's voice a dozen times in his mind. "A police officer just hit me." No panic, no drama, just a wounded calm that told him everything he needed to know. She had held herself together, but she was shaken to her bones, and someone would answer for it. Victor didn't yell. He never had to. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and made it quieter. The kind who sat at the back of community meetings but remembered every word spoken. People in town knew him as Mr. Clark, polite, helpful, reclusive. They didn't know he once taught elite teams how to breach compounds in the dead of night, or that his voice had been the last thing a hostage heard before freedom. He parked a block away from the scene, not out of fear, out of control. When he stepped out of his truck, he wore nothing flashy, just a dark button-up, jeans, and his old army boots. Scuffed, silent, ready. He walked like someone with purpose, not permission. As he approached the bookstore's corner, he saw her. Sienna, sitting on the curb, legs pulled in, her cheek raw and blotched from the slap. An EMT was gently dabbing a coal pack against her skin. A small crowd had gathered, standing back but watching, murmuring. They didn't know what to say. Maybe they were waiting for someone else to say it first. Officer Delmore stood nearby, arms crossed, trying to explain to another officer why the girl escalated it. His tone was defensive, loud, puffed with the insecurity of a man who knew something was shifting against him. Victor said nothing. He simply walked. Sienna looked up when she saw the boots first, and for the first time since the slap, her face changed. Not to fear, but to stillness. "Dad," she whispered. Victor gave a small nod, barely perceptible. He knelt, his shadow shielding her like a shield wall. His hand didn't tremble as he moved a strand of hair from her forehead. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her voice broke just slightly. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I know," he said. "You don't have to explain." He stood slowly like a mountain rising. And then he turned. Officer Delmore was still talking, still trying to control the narrative, until he saw Victor's eyes. Some silences chill you because they're awkward, and then some silences chill you because you suddenly remember your place in the world. Delmore tried to regain footing. "Sir, I'd ask you not to interfere. This matter is being handled." Victor didn't step closer. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "I'd like your name and badge number." That stopped everything. Delmore bristled. "It's already been documented." "Name and badge number," Victor repeated with no inflection. Not a threat, just an expectation. Other officers turned, sensing the gravity shift. A lieutenant walked up, whispering something into Delmore's ear. He looked confused, alarmed. Then Victor reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small, worn leather folder. He opened it with precision. Inside was a Department of Defense credential. The kind you don't argue with. The kind that isn't even shown unless necessary. Delmore went pale. Victor's voice didn't shake. "I'm Commander Victor Clark, United States Armed Forces, retired. I train Joint Task Force instructors in advanced tactical ethics. I know the manual you broke before you even touched it. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for accountability. And you're going to give me the name of your supervisor right now." The street was silent. The power had shifted. And for the first time since it happened, Sienna exhaled. The next morning, Greenville didn't wake up to birdsong. It woke up to headlines. Teen slapped by officer during bookstore stop. Her father was a military ethics commander. Sienna Clark's silence goes viral. Footage sparks outrage across state. He struck the wrong girl. Viral video renews debate over police conduct. The video captured by 13-year-old Darren Jones had traveled across platforms like wildfire. 28 seconds of grainy footage. Sienna's startled flinch. The officer's raised hand. The sickening sound of impact. And a girl's stunned stillness, followed by a moment more terrifying than the slap itself. her quiet refusal to retaliate. And then the world saw Victor Clark walk onto the scene. No shouting, no confrontation, just a father stepping into a space where justice had been broken and demanding it be rebuilt without even raising his voice. At the Clark residence, Sienna sat at the edge of the couch, her phone buzzing nonstop beside her. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, like someone trying to listen underwater. Victor stood by the window, arms folded. "People want me to speak," she said finally, her voice dry. "Everyone wants a quote, an interview. I didn't ask for this." He nodded slowly. "You didn't. That's what makes you powerful." She looked up, confused. "You didn't perform," he continued. "You lived. You survived. And sometimes that terrifies people more than rage." Sienna hesitated. "What if I don't want to be the face of this?" "Then you don't have to be," Victor said gently. "But know this, your silence already taught more than a dozen speeches ever could." Later that afternoon, a press conference was announced at the Greenville Police Department. Reporters crowded outside the courthouse steps. Some locals stood across the street, holding signs that read, "I could be Sienna. Silence shouldn't cost us blood. Stillness is not guilt." The mayor, a wiry man with a trembling voice, stepped up to the podium. He read a prepared statement. "We acknowledge the disturbing footage involving Officer Ray Delmore and Miss Sienna Clark. Officer Delmore has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation." The murmurs started instantly. Administrative leave, a bureaucratic shrug, a pause button. Not justice, but what came next shifted the air. From the side of the podium, a new figure stepped forward. Captain Eliza Marin, a rare black woman in the upper ranks of the force. She didn't bring a script. "I won't pretend this is new," she said. "We've seen power misused before, but what happened on Oakridge Street was not just an abuse of force, it was a failure of our culture." She turned to the crowd, her voice growing. "Sienna Clark did not resist. She did not provoke. What she did was exist, and we made that feel like a threat." She paused. "And now we must decide. Will we protect our comfort or our citizens?" The applause was hesitant at first, then firm, then overwhelming. That evening, Victor returned to the base where he occasionally trained tactical units. He didn't put on a uniform. He didn't call ahead. But every soldier in that room stood when he walked in. He looked around the classroom, young men and women trained to face terrorists, insurgents, the darkest situations imaginable. And he asked a single question. "What do you do when the threat isn't real, but your fear is?" No one answered. He let the silence hang long enough to sting. That question isn't about combat, it's about control. The moment you let your fear make decisions for you, you stop being a protector. You become a liability. He closed the folder in front of him. And the country doesn't need more fear in uniform. That night, Sienna scrolled through hundreds of messages, classmates offering support, strangers telling her how brave she was, activists asking for her voice. She didn't reply to any of them, but she did write something, just one sentence. She posted it at midnight, white text over a black screen. "I didn't raise my voice, but that doesn't mean I'm silent." Within an hour, it had over 200,000 shares. The next 72 hours weren't loud. They were trembling. The city of Greenville, small enough for its secrets to echo, but large enough for the nation to notice, began to fracture. On one side were those who'd seen the video, seen Sienna's face, seen the stillness after the slap, and said, "This isn't just about her." And on the other hand were those grasping for reasons. "We don't know what happened before the clip." Officers have to make fast decisions. Maybe she said something. The truth was, she hadn't, and that made it harder. Harder to justify, harder to excuse, harder to look away. Meanwhile, inside the Clark home, the living room had become a quiet war room. Victor sat at the dining table, laptop open, his glasses resting lower on his nose than usual. Beside him lay a binder marked Joint Forces Code of Conduct, internal revision drafts. Across the table, Sienna scrolled through dozens of articles, some supportive, some accusatory. Some turned her into a hero she didn't ask to be. Others tried to reduce her to the girl who got slapped. "Do you think I should speak at the town forum?" she asked, not looking up. Victor didn't answer immediately. He closed the laptop. "I think the question is," he said softly, "are you ready to be misquoted?" She looked up. "Because if you speak, it won't just be your words. It'll be what people want your words to mean." Sienna nodded slowly. "Then I better say something they can't twist." 2 days later, the community forum took place at Jefferson Hall. It was standing room only. Reporters flanked the back row. Clergy from 3 different churches stood shoulder to shoulder. Teenagers, veterans, professors, janitors, each face etched with expectation. And near the front row, flanked by 2 state investigators, sat Officer Ray Delmore. His uniform was off, civilian suit, nervous sweat, a man now without the shield he once misused. The moderator introduced Sienna, and the room shifted. She didn't walk up with a speech. She held only a folded piece of paper and her phone. As she stood before the microphone, her voice didn't waver. "I never thought silence could be this loud," she began. Pause. "You've seen what happened to me. But what matters more is what could have happened if I'd moved wrong, spoken wrong, or just had a different look in my eyes." She unfolded the paper. "This is the receipt from the bookstore. That's what I had in my bag." She held it up, her hand steady. "One officer decided that made me a suspect. Another officer, my father, decided it made me a daughter worth defending. I need you to ask yourselves, why did one man see danger and another see worth?" In the silence that followed, she read one final line, this time from her phone. It was a quote from one of her psychology textbooks. "Power does not corrupt, it reveals." Then she stepped down. Later that evening, the town council voted in emergency session. Officer Delmore would be officially terminated. The Greenville Police Department would undergo a full external audit with the participation of federal civil rights observers. A new position, Civilian Equity Advisor, would be formed to help shape future use of force policies. They offered the inaugural role to Commander Victor Clark. He declined. Instead, he submitted a 7-page reform draft written in his signature direct tone. No frills, just solutions. On the final page, he added a handwritten note. "I train soldiers to handle combat. It's time we train peacekeepers to handle humanity." That same night, as the Clark family sat quietly in their kitchen, something rare happened. Victor, normally composed, paused as he poured tea into 2 chipped mugs. "I was scared, Sienna," he admitted. She looked up. "Not of what happened, but of what you'd carry because of it." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she placed a hand over his warm, steady. "I'm not carrying it alone," she whispered. 1 week after the incident, Greenville had changed, but not in ways most people would notice at first glance. The streets still smelled of morning coffee and the low hum of buses. The same wind passed through the oak trees near the town square. The bookstore on Oakridge still opened at 9 a.m. sharp, and Mrs. Whitaker still sold dahlias outside the flower stall across the road. But underneath all that sameness, something had shifted. People made eye contact longer. Strangers nodded in acknowledgement, and young black girls walked into shops without wondering if they needed to explain their presence. That was Sienna's doing, even if she never claimed it. The new Civilian Oversight Committee was sworn in that Thursday. Sienna, by her request, wasn't on it. "I don't want to turn this into a platform," she said. "I just want people to do the right thing even when no one's recording." But when asked to speak at the committee's launch, she didn't decline. This time she came prepared. At the podium, she read a poem she'd written the night before. It wasn't long, just 16 lines. But the one everyone remembered was the seventh. I was silent because I was taught to be safe. Now I speak so others don't have to be. The room fell silent. Not the heavy silence of grief or the awkward quiet of guilt, but the kind of silence that felt like a seed going into soil. The kind that promised something was finally beginning. Across town, Victor Clark stood before a different kind of audience, a small training class of recruits at the State Police Academy. No cameras, no podium, no applause, just future officers aged 22 to 28, some idealistic, some uncertain, all watching this man who had become a symbol of unflinching composure. He didn't talk about weapons or tactics or how to disarm a suspect. He talked about presence. Your job is not to be feared, he told them. It's to be trusted. Fear doesn't build communities. Trust does. A young cadet raised her hand. But what if someone is dangerous? What if it feels threatening? Victor paused, then walked to the whiteboard and wrote one sentence. The presence of a threat is not proof of guilt. He turned back. Your fear is real, but if you don't learn to control it, it becomes your weapon, and that's not what your badge is for. The cadet nodded slowly. She would remember those words long after graduation. On a cool Sunday morning, just as spring began pressing soft green against the town's stone walls, Sienna and Victor sat together on a bench overlooking Lake Garrison. She held a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, the same copy she'd bought the day she was slapped. Its corner was still scuffed from the fall, but the pages, they were all intact. I don't feel brave, Sienna said suddenly. Victor smiled faintly. Good. Bravery doesn't usually come with a feeling, it comes with action. She turned the page, then hesitated. Do you think it's over now? He shook his head gently. No, but it's quieter. And sometimes that means the world is listening. Moral of the story, some battles aren't fought with fists or fury. They're fought in the space between impulse and dignity, between what's done to you and what you choose to become after it. Sienna didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't rise with rage. She stood in silence, and in that silence the system shook. A town listened. And justice, quiet, slow, but unrelenting, began to move. So the next time someone says, she was too quiet to make a difference, remember this story and remind them, quiet doesn't mean powerless. It means measured, intentional, and sometimes unstoppable.